John Brennan served as director of the CIA under President Obama. He joins us now exclusively. Director Brenner, it's really nice to have you here. Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir. The reason this whole subject of condolence calls is coming up is because we lost 4 American service members in Niger. Senator McCain has said he wants more information about what exactly happened. Is there anything about the circumstances as they're known publicly right now, where these soldiers were operating, the conditions under which they were operating, the fact that one of them apparently was left behind? Is there anything that raises questions in your mind?
Well, the United States military has been involved in providing assistance to a lot of counterterrorism forces, military forces, particularly in the Sahel where terrorist groups reside. There are questions about why they were so far forward with the Niger military, because going into those places, it really makes it difficult to help the group if they are ambushed, and it seems like they were ambushed by a larger group. So I know that Secretary Mattis and others are going to be looking into the details of this and how the approvals process were made, but there are questions about what was going on.
Let me ask you about North Korea. Over the summer, the president said that he would unleash fire and fury on North Korea. At the UN, he said if we're forced to defend ourselves or our allies will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. He said his Secretary of State, Mr. Tillerson, should stop wasting his time in negotiating. As you hear those things, based on what you know about that situation, do you think this is the president being that tough negotiator that he promised his supporters he would be? Or is this a president who doesn't understand the gravity and the seriousness of that issue?
I think it's both. I think he's trying to demonstrate that he is tough and he's trying to intimidate opponents. But at the same time, he is not experienced at all in international brinksmanship and on these issues. So I think his comments have been rather provocative, and it has served to increase tensions, not to de-escalate them. And I'm hoping that Rex Tillerson is going to be able to continue some of his efforts to try to address these issues behind the scenes.
It's interesting because you said at a forum last night that you thought the chances of some kind of military conflict with North Korea had now risen to either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. So 25% chance that that could happen. Is that because of North Korea's actions, because of the U.S.'s actions and rhetoric, or both?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think the caustic and bellicose comments that are coming out of Washington and Mr. Trump on his tweets really has led to an escalation in tensions. And I'm concerned that there could be some type of clash between South Korea and North Korean forces that could escalate.
Well, let me ask you this, and I almost feel weird asking you this, but you've read the same stories that I've read. And you know the key players around the president in Mattis and in McMaster and John Kelly. The stories are going around out there that if the president inches closer to some kind of a nuclear confrontation with North Korea, that those guys are going to do something. They're going to lock him in a room. They're going to tackle him. You're smiling, but these are the stories that are out there, and that they will prevent him from carrying out any action that would cause that. How do you feel? Is it all nonsense?
No, I think the military leaders, current and former, Mattis, Kelly, also Joe Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, they know the risks of escalation. They know just how dangerous the situation is, and I think they are governors on the president's instincts to continue to try to intimidate and bully.
You're technically not answering the question. Would they take some action to prevent the president from carrying out an order?
The president has unilateral authority to be able to authorize military action. That order goes through Secretary Mattis. Secretary Mattis can either try to talk him out of it, disagree with it, carry it out, or
because in July you said it is the obligation of some executive branch officials to refuse to carry out some of those orders that are inconsistent with what this country is all about.
And I was talking about in the context of some of the, like the firing of Jim Comey and the efforts by Mr. Trump and others to try to, I think, delay and to put obstacles in the way of some of the investigations that are underway. I think that has to go forward. We are a country of laws, and sometimes I feel that Mr. Trump feels that it's Trump's laws that trump others.
If you'd been in your old job and you had been given an order that you thought was dangerous to this country, would you have flouted an order?
I'd have to make a decision. Like if I was asked to renew waterboarding, I would have said, no, I'm not going to do it, and you're going to have to fire me. That would have been plain and simple for me.
Do you think Mattis and Kelly and Dunford and McMaster would be willing to do the same if circumstances warranted?
It all depends on the circumstances. They are patriots, all of them, and they understand the gravity of the situation. They understand the gravity, and I don't believe Mr. Trump does.
Real quickly, based on what you know about the situation in Iran, if the president rips up that Iran nuclear deal, does he risk in the short term owning a nuclear Iran?
Well, he certainly has another issue and another problem. He also alienates a lot of our partners and allies that were part of that agreement. And I think he runs the risk of escalated tensions in the Gulf that could redound to our detriment and to potential risk to U.S. military in the region.
Will you stay for the next hour? We've got a lot to talk to you about.
Sir,
John, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Great to have you here.
Appreciate it.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.